Hello. Um, Hi, I'm Ashley Alicea, and I am currently an evangelist for games at Unity Technologies. And I'll talk a little bit more about Unity in just a bit, but to provide some context as to who I am and kind of what I do, I'm originally from Dorado, Puerto Rico, and outside of my day job and kind of much throughout my career, I've been an indie developer. I've been making games for about 10 years now, almost, and I like to make lots of bright, fun, colorful games. I've worked on games for Facebook. I've made web games. I've made different kinds of content for companies like Unity. And really, I just love game development. I love all aspects of it. I do art, I do programming, and kind of everything in between. And I'm really excited to share my love for game development with everyone, which is kind of how I ended up at Unity. And I was really active in the game development community scene in Puerto Rico when I was still living there. This is a picture from the first global game jam ever that we hosted many years ago at this point. But this was kind of Puerto Rico's kind of first event on a global scale, and it was really it was exciting time to be on the island. And I'm really excited for you all now because I've seen how much the community has grown, how many people are a part of the community now. As you can see, we started out really small, but people like Carlo and so many others are doing so many great things to grow the community. So I'm really happy to join this live stream today and talk with you all. But enough about me, and let's talk about Unity. So using Unity for game jams. So again, my role at Unity is a games evangelist. And everyone thinks that's some kind of religious cult thing, but I promise you it's not. It's basically my job is to professionally geek out about Unity and making games all the time, and it's the best job ever. And really my goal is to help the Unity community understand what tools and resources are available to them to make really successful and amazing games. So what am I going to talk about in this presentation? I'm going to talk about how to learn Unity. I know that many of you, this might be your first game jam, or you might be brand new to using Unity. I'll talk a little bit about how you can get started with using it for your game jam. I'll talk about how to create a 3D world using tools like ProBuilder, ProGrids, and Polybrush, and I'll explain what those are later. I'll go over tools that you can use to create stunning 2D games. I'll show you a tool that you can use to edit sequences and cutscenes. We'll talk about how to use cameras in your games using Cinemachine. I'll speak a little bit about how to add augmented reality or special effects to your games with things like Air Foundation and the shader and visual effect graph. We'll talk about where to find models and textures and audio and all those magical things that you need to add to your game. I'll talk about where to find some really good inspiration. And then lastly, I'll share some jam tips with you all. So let's get started. So first off with Unity Learn. Now with Unity Learn, this is Unity's brand new platform for helping our community get to understand how to learn and use the different facets of the program. Now, I am a big fan of several different Unity Learn resources, but I actually have a couple of here that I think work really well for game jams. Now, the first one are the in-editor creative mods. If you open Unity, if you download Unity and open it on your computer, you're going to get a little window that says, make a new project or log in or whatever. There's a tab that on the side that says Learn. If you click on that tab, you're going to get access to these in-editor mods that can help you very quickly get started with creating a go-kart game, an FPS shooter game, or a platformer game like Mario. These are really, really useful if you've never had any experience with Unity before. It's a great way to learn. I recommend even playing with some of them now before the jam so you have a little bit of experience and you can get yourself ready. Now, if you have a little bit more time and you want to get a good overview of Unity, I really recommend John Lemon's Haunted Haunt. It's a really fun game that you can create in Unity that will show you a lot of the basics pretty quickly. We also have our Creator Kit, which teaches you how to do introductory game programming. And then we also have an RPG kit. So if you want to make a role-playing game, that's the kit for you. Now, for those of you who are more experienced with Unity, definitely don't be shy about checking these resources out, because what we often see our community members do is that they may be experienced with Unity, but they might use resources or assets from these existing kits. I know that I've seen some people in last year's Game Jam take things like John Lemon's Haunted Jaunt or the Creator Kit for Beginner Code and completely swap out the assets and customize the code to make the game the way they want it. And on that topic, if you want to be able to kind of really tinker with the world and kind of want like a blank slate to work with, I highly recommend Unity's 2D Game Kit and 3D Game Kit. These are basically pre-assembled 2D and 3D worlds that come with all the different parts that you need to be able to build a platformer level or to be able to build a world that you can explore. Now, they're both kind of outer space themed, but it has the foundations of many similar kind of game jam type games. So again, this is another good resource where you can create your platformer, let's say, and then swap out the existing art assets with art assets that you create with your team during the jam, or maybe vice versa for programming. And lastly, we have Unity Playground. Unity Playground is a really great tool for creating kind of simple predefined games in Unity. And I think this is the easiest by far to kind of build out your ideas, prototype some tests, and reskin them so you don't have to use the art assets that it comes with. You can create your own art and more to use with this experience. It comes with really easy to use drag and drop scripts. So I've seen a lot of success from people who are artists using a tool like this and using the drag and drop scripts to build up their game. And really, you can create something pretty impressive in just a day without having to know any programming. But you learn a lot in the process as well. Now, let's say you are beyond learning how to use Unity and you want to know what Unity tools are out there so that you can get started making some pretty awesome games. The first I want to recommend for game jams, and I think this is my favorite of them all, is ProBuilder and ProGrids. So ProBuilder is a way to build 3D meshes in Unity without having to use an external program. So if you don't have something like Maya or Blender, you can make your 3D models directly in Unity. Now, this example that I have here on the screen, it's showing that we're kind of building like a doorway, and we're in the process of building a doorway here, but you can use it to create all types of shapes. You can have ProBuilder auto create you a set of stairs, a ramp. You can create different shapes and assemble them together. You can make anything from terrain and buildings to characters and people, even plants and animals. Essentially, if you can 3D model it, you can make it with ProBuilder. It's going to be a little bit more simple compared to tools like Maya, but during a game jam, that's kind of just what you want to focus on anyway. Simple, quick iteration of your assets. Now, when you combine ProBuilder with Polybrush, you really unlock a lot of potential for the meshes that you can create within Unity. Polybrush is a way to take those meshes that you sculpted using ProBuilder and actually kind of sculpt them out, like actually like move the meshes. You can see with the cursor here on the left, we're kind of pushing and pulling the contours of the sphere that we created. And you can also use Polybrush's brush capabilities, not just to sculpt your mesh objects, but to also do things like place prefabs on them. So let's say you're using ProBuilder and Polybrush to make terrains. You can make some prefabs in Unity for rocks or grass or trees, and you can use that prefab brush to paint those objects onto your environment kind of like randomly. Saves you a lot of time and helps you create a kind of nice 3D environment really quickly. And speaking of using cool tools for 3D worlds, I also really recommend Unity's brand new terrain tool. It's truly fantastic. It's those of you who have used terrain before in Unity, you may find these new updates to be really exciting because we've really revamped how this tool works. You now have a lot of different brush presets and the ability to import different maps and more into the terrain tool to be able to generate custom terrains for your games really, really quickly. So if you want to make a really nice kind of mini open world environment, because I don't recommend creating an entire open world environment for a game jam, but you can create a small little slice of one using these terrain tools really easily. I am not really an artist so much as I am a programmer, and it's amazing to me that I can open up the terrain tools and start sculpting out a terrain that looks pretty realistic. So it's a lot of fun to use. Now, as a mobile game developer, 2D games are some of my favorite things to create. This is what I kind of do for fun outside of Unity, and I'm really excited to share these tools with you all because they're brand new and pretty awesome. So Unity's new 2D tools help you create 2D worlds that not only look really nice, but help you assemble them really quickly. I'm sure many of you here have made 2D games before, and you might understand the pain of setting up your tile maps and setting up a grid system or a placement system to be able to place all your tiles together, or making groups of all your tiles in Photoshop and then bringing those in as individual assets into Unity. Well, you don't have to worry about any of that anymore because we have a tool to help you with this process called tile maps. Now, tile maps let you import your sprite sheets that you can create for your world in your 2D environments. This could be anything from the platforms that your characters work on to environment objects like clouds and trees and more. And really what we want this to do is almost to be like a paintbrush and palette. You go into your tile palette here on in your Unity editor. You select the asset that you want to place in your environment, and then you move into scene view and you just click and stamp them where you want them to be. Now, you can do some pretty advanced things with tile maps. For example, you can have them auto-detect which direction they're facing, so they can automatically use, for example, the sprites that have grass on the top of them, or they can automatically detect which is an edge and which is a bottom of your platforms, which can really help you speed the creation of your environment. With tile maps, you can also use something called Sprite Shape. Now, Sprite Shape is a way that you can apply splines to your sprites in Unity. And as you can see, you could bend them and adjust them and create pathways, and Unity will auto-place the different sprites and tiles that you need. So in a way, once you establish what your tiles are and which direction they're facing, you could paint pathways and Unity will automatically generate them for you. And then you could edit them like you see here in this GIF. Now we also have a brand new sprite rigging and PSD importer tools. I love these. I used to do a lot of 2D art in Photoshop. So the great thing is that I can make my 2D art in Photoshop. I can make sure my character is separated into different layers. So if I make a character like this girl, right, I'll have a layer for her hand. I'll have a layer for her forearm. I'll have a layer for her shoulder, and then one for her body, and then individual ones for her legs, and so on. Now, in the past, I would have had to worry about importing each of those individual layers as images to go into Unity. But now I can just draw it in Photoshop, and when I'm done, I can import that PSD directly into Unity, and it'll automatically set up my 2D character in this kind of rigging view, so I can apply bones to it for animation purposes, and it will keep all my different layers separate. Now, adding the bones is incredibly easy. You literally can just go to your bones menu here and select, edit bone or add a bone, and you can just click on the areas of your sprite to apply the bones, and Unity will automatically detect which sprite you are probably referencing. So if you make, for example, a bone here for the shoulder and the arm, Unity will kind of understand, all right, if they place that bone over the arm, that's meant to control the arm. You can link your bones together, so when you say you move the hips, it'll move the entire upper body. You can also set up inverse kinematics to help with your games, especially if you're working with physics. So using the rigging tools is a lot of fun, especially when it comes to the animation tools available in Unity as well. You can use the animation tools to create frame-by-frame animations and create different animations for your character. So for example, you could create a running animation, you can create a jump animation and more. And then you could save these animation files and use them later on in your project when, for example, let's say you press a button, you hold the button down and you move your controller, it will activate the running animation that you created with this tool, and so on. We also have brand new 2D lights available in Unity. I love this because this is a quick way to add polish to your game jam games really easily. For those of you who work in 3D, I'm sure you're very familiar with how lights are set up and how lighting can affect your scene. Well, you can now do the same exact thing with your 2D environments. The 2D lights will affect the sprites in your scene. So you can see here in this example with this kind of starburst light moving around, how the rays of the light affect the asteroids in this environment. This is really a great way to add depth and color and more into your 2D games and breathe some life into them. And it's really easy to set up, and it's absolutely worth the results. So Unity Timeline. Timeline is a fantastic tool to create sequences, cutscenes, and more in Unity. So let's say you create a bunch of animations, or you have some existing animations for your characters in Unity. You can put all those animations together in Timeline using this kind of timeline window right here. You can see we have these little blocks of different animations. Essentially, you can use the timeline to stack these animation clips together and have them play in one entire sequence. If you've ever edited a video or a film, it's a very similar process. You can add an audio track into your timeline, so you can have music play while your entire cutscene happens. And you can use timeline to not just control your characters, but kind of most elements that you want in Unity. You can trigger if a game object is visible or not. You can move game objects around using timeline and have their positions kind of saved there. You can adjust and set up different shots for your camera using timeline as well. Really, there's so much that you can do. It's a really massive tool that has a lot of great sub features. You can even do things like have certain timeline sequences get triggered based on events in your code. So there's a lot of good resources there. As with all the tools I've been showing, the link that I'm showing here up above is the best place to go to find out more and find out resources as to how to use it. We also have Cinemachine. Cinemachine is pretty fantastic, and it's a great tool to help automate all the work that comes in to setting up your cameras in your game. So you can see here I have the camera like moving around this track, and now when my player controls this kind of spaceship in this racing game, the camera will automatically move to a position that's ideal for viewing based on that Cinemachine setup. So Cinemachine is a great way to have your, for example, game camera always focus on the most important things in your scene or your environment. You can tell your Cinemachine cameras, okay, always focus on this character or on this game object. Or you can have it have the player be able to move the camera themselves. Really what it helps is provide a lot of automation and helpful tools to be able to set up your camera shots perfectly. For those of you who have worked with real cameras, you'll also find within Cinemachine actual settings to treat your Unity camera as if it were a real camera, to deal with settings like focal length and the lens that you use and a lot more. Now, I'm going to jump into kind of special, cool added features that you can do with Unity. I'm going to take this time to jump back into Facebook to see if there are any questions at all. I'll wait about a minute, and then I'll jump back in and tell you all about AR Foundation, Shader Graph, and Visual Effect Graph. So AR Foundation. One thing that I've been asked a lot recently is how to set up augmented reality for game jam games or at hackathons. So one tool that I really want to share with you all is called AR Foundation. This is basically a platform within Unity that you can use to set up augmented reality experiences either for Android devices or iOS devices. It contains, when you download it, a lot of sample projects and sample mechanics so that you can essentially drag and drop what you want to create in augmented reality and use that in your experience that you're creating. For example, it comes with a sample project, as kind of how you see on the left, that lets you scan an environment, and then wherever you tap on the screen, you can place an object. Now, augmented reality is an extremely fun tool to use. In my experience, especially at some game jams, there are often a lot of people who have never used it before. But it's definitely way more easier to work with than you would think. So if you're interested in augmented reality, I definitely recommend that you check out this tool. Shader Graph. So Shader Graph, I think, is an amazing tool for game jams because for those of us here who code shaders, I think we know how kind of long and arduous the process can be for creating shader code. But now the good news is that within Unity, using Shader Graph, you can create your own custom shaders for your game objects without having to write a single line of code. You can use Shader Graph to import textures and styles and different effects and more into your shader nodes. So you kind of you see us dragging here like this line from this node into this kind of PBR master node is what it's called. You essentially just plug in all the different effects that you want into that main master node, and then you can see the final result here on the bottom, and that's what you get when you apply it to a character in your game. Now, creating shaders is a great way to do things like, you know, when you have a character get damaged in a video game or lose some health, they kind of flash red. It takes minutes to create a shader in Shader Graph to do that for you. And you can activate or deactivate the shader using things like code or timeline and more. Now, along with creating super awesome shaders, you can also create really cool visual effects and particle systems using Unity's brand new visual effect graph. Now, this effect graph can basically help you set up GPU-based particle systems. So if you've used Unity particle systems before, you're kind of familiar with the basics, but those particles are based on the CPU, whereas with the visual effect graph, you can have GPU-based particles, which lets you create enormous particle simulations that are really performant, which is really also helpful for a game jam. So using the same drag and drop node system, you can build your special effects using the effect graph. Excuse me. This visual effect graph can be used to create everything from these kind of cool book flipping laser effects here to electricity, to winter storms, to like wind and rain and more, and giant explosions. Really, you can kind of create whatever you think of. And again, you don't have to write code to make these effects. You can just drag and drop the properties and effects that you need. And it's a lot of fun. Now I'm going to talk about some general assets for game jams. But I can't talk about those assets without talking about the Unity Asset Store. Now, I know many Unity creators have seen the Asset Store, Some have used it, some have not. I really recommend checking it out for the game jam if you haven't already. If you are working on a team, for example, that is mostly programmers, and you need art, and you don't have anybody to make art for your game, the Unity Asset Store is a great place to visit to find art assets that you can use in your project. There are all sorts of assets. Some are paid, but many are free. And I really recommend you checking to see if you're really stuck on something, or you're stuck on an asset that you might need and it's really blocking your progress. Check out the Unity Asset Store. You can even filter the pricing options by showing free options only. It's very likely that somebody in the community already created and shared something that you may need for your game. So again, like my kind of like big theme for game jams is don't reinvent the wheel. If someone has it available free to use, definitely don't be afraid to use it. Now within the asset store, there's so many assets that I wanted to just give a quick call out to some really good ones specifically for game jams. And those are first the Unity standard assets. Now these assets are incredibly useful for all sorts of games. It was made for Unity 2017.3, but it actually still works in Unity 2019.3, which just came out a couple of days ago. So this gives you a lot of pre-built settings that you can apply to your game objects. Things like controller inputs. Being able to have a character in your environment and just drag a third-person controller onto it, and it just works out of the box. You can plug in your controller and move your character around. And it saves a lot of time for doing those kind of common steps that you would normally find in game development. Also with adding things like health and scoring and more, the standard assets can really help. Plus they come with a bunch of cool graphics that you can use and art assets that you can use for your games, like spaceships and people and more. Now, last year for Global Game Jam 2019, we released a list of assets that different people at Unity all thought are really helpful for game jams. There's over 75 free assets on this list, and even though it was made in 2019, you could still find it on the asset store. Just search for Global Game Jam free assets, and you'll see lots of resources listed under the page that should come up. Things like the 2D game kit, like I mentioned before, but also assets like audio and music, particle systems, different visual effects, tools for doing letting your users take screenshots and more. Really, there's a lot of different cool solutions out there that you can use for your games. I also really want to recommend checking out #MadeWithUnity across social media, whether you're a Twitter person, Facebook, Instagram. This is where the Unity community is sharing their different projects that they're working on. And to me and many other people in the community, we consider this a wonderful resource to find inspiration for your next games or for your different art aesthetics or art direction and more. You can learn about really cool techniques that people are employing in their games. Many people actually even share how they made those. So, for example, if you like how the camera works on this little kind of island adventure here in the corner, you can probably see the creator talk about how they made that on the Made with Unity hashtag. So if you find yourself stumped during the game jam and need some ideas, this is my favorite recommendation for kind of getting some creativity sparked. Now, I want to point out that a lot of really amazing games were actually made with Unity at Global Game Jam. So if you need a little bit of encouragement and you wonder what you can kind of do with your game after the jam, these are some fantastic examples. The teams behind Surge and Simulator, Mushroom 11, Lovers in a Dangerous Space-Time, and Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes. All these games were first prototyped and built out at a Global Game Jam. And then their creators loved their idea so much that they kept working on it. Some of them spent a couple of months on their games more, some of them spent a couple of years. But in the end, they kind of fleshed out a really amazing experience that they then put on different stores like Steam and more for the community to enjoy. And now these are kind of big indie hits. So you never know, your next game jam game could be something amazing. So I'm going to share some general jam advice. Let me check back quickly to see if there's any questions. Oh, okay, there's a question. So, all right, is there only one timeline per scene? Can a prefab also react to timeline animations? So for your first question, one timeline per scene, you can actually have many timelines. And one thing that I recommend to creators is that you have one main timeline and that you can make separate timelines and branch them together. So we call those sub-timelines. So I have one timeline usually in my projects to manage all of the different timelines that I have in my scene. And then within each timeline, I'll only work with one type of asset. For example, I might have a timeline just for my camera movements, or I might have a timeline just for my player character. I may even have a timeline just for my special effects. I combine all of those timelines together under the master timeline, and then that's what lets me kind of easily manage all the different kind of timeline assets that I'm working with under one header. So hopefully, Pedro, that helps with your question. Now, can prefabs also react to timeline animations? Absolutely. You can have a prefab in your environment and animate that using a timeline, and it works just as if you were animating a regular game object. You may be asking if you could apply a timeline animation to your prefab so that any prefab you add into your game environment will have the same timeline animation playing. In that case, I would just recommend using a regular animation setup. So you make an animation clip, and then you could activate that clip specifically in your main timeline and have that applied to all your prefabs. Now, I get asked a lot about game jams, and part of that is because I've been doing a lot of game jams for a very, very long time. My first game jam was when I was in college, and that was well over, 12, 13 years ago, and I fell in love. Game jams are my absolute favorite thing to do. They're my favorite part of this industry. And I have done dozens and dozens and dozens of jams since I became a game developer. I've done Global Game Jam every single year for the past 10 years. And I usually try to do at least 5 game jams every year. So I've lost count at this point, but I've learned a lot in that process that I want to share with you all. Because especially for people who just joined a game jam, it can be pretty overwhelming and intimidating, and that's okay. When we all start out with game jams, none of us have any idea what we're doing. So I'm happy to share kind of these little general insights that I think make game jams a lot more fun and a lot more helpful, not just for the duration of the event, but also for your career. The number one rule or commandment that I tell everyone to abide by for a game jam is keep your goals small. The biggest problem I see in every single game jam, and it happens to at least half the teams, is overscoping. Everyone has an incredible idea for a game, and sometimes that idea can be way too big to accomplish in just one weekend. We see people try to attempt it anyways, and then they end up with a game that's either broken or incomplete or not working. And what's usually much more impressive are people who make games that are very, very tiny examples, but that have a lot of polish and love and heart put into them. And these are really good game jam games. Now, this is not to say that you shouldn't, try to make a decently scaled, size game if you want to. But keep in mind things like how many team members do you have? A team of 5 programmers and 5 artists are going to be able to make a little bit more than a team of 1 artist and 1 programmer. So keep that in mind. Keep your goals really small. I recommend sticking to one game mechanic. So I might go to a game jam and say, okay, I'm going to make a game like Space Invaders, but with a twist of some sort. Really, that's kind of one primary mechanic: moving and shooting, and then you have like your scoring and health system. But look at how that simple game already evolved into kind of three significant things that you have to program and design and create art for. So the more complicated the game gets, the more aspects you're going to have to work on, and it becomes too much. So stay small, keep focused, and it'll help your game go a long way. The second bit of advice I have is asking for help. I see a lot of people at game jams who are either really shy because they're new, or shy because they think they may not have enough experience, or they might have imposter syndrome, or maybe people are really competitive and they want to figure out everything by themselves. Like, I got this, I can figure this out, I don't need help, which is commendable, but everyone needs help at some point. And asking for help is a huge part of the fun of the game jam. I've made so many friends at different game jam events when I've gotten stuck on the project I'm working on, and I turn to the team next to me and go, hey, do any of you have experience with implementing this type of feature? Or, hey, do you have experience with a network game programming? Could you help me out for a bit? Almost everyone is so glad to help, and really everyone succeeding in a game jam means that kind of everyone wins. So definitely don't be shy to ask for help, no matter what your experience level is. Even if you're brand new, your questions aren't silly. Definitely ask them. All of us have been there before, and we've been in your shoes, and so we know exactly kind of what you're going through, and we're all happy to help. Now, on that note, your friends are definitely a great resource to ask for help from, but also check out social media, Discord, and the Unity forums, because they're fantastic places to find help and answers to your questions. Throughout Global Game Jam, goodness knows that the Unity team receives dozens and dozens and dozens of questions all weekend long. The Unity forums explode with people asking for help or sharing what they're working on, and the same with different community Discords around the world. These are incredible resources. Use them to your advantage. I see so many people who don't complete their Game Jam projects because they spent too much time trying to figure out how something works, or they didn't ask for help, and if they did, they could have been done a lot earlier. Save time, ask for help, stay focused. These are all kind of key things to help you have a successful game jam. Now, on that note also, don't worry so much about making your game perfect. It's really helpful if you can make it work, and even if it doesn't work, any game jam project is a successful game jam project. No matter how many features made it in, no matter how much of your plan you ended up using, this is about the journey, not the result. You will learn so much throughout this weekend. Flow with it, go with it. Don't spend too much time on one tiny aspect of your game to make it perfect if it sacrifices the rest of your project. What I normally do for game jams is I just make something really quickly and try to make it work. And it usually looks ugly and terrible, and it could be acting kind of weird. But then if I get something done the first couple of hours, that gives me the rest of the jam to focus on doing those polished passes, for getting help with different resources. And really, it's a good way to understand the true scope of what you're working on, and know kind of what realistically you can accomplish in your event. All right. So another tip that every single person will tell you, and I swear like very few people listen to it, but I think the community is getting a bit better at this. Stay hydrated. Get some rest. Please sleep. Please sleep during the game jam. Don't be me in game jams in the past where I would stay up every single hour and never sleep and go insane by the end of the event. And eat well. Don't just eat junk food or chips. Try to go out and eat good meals during the game jam, because I guarantee you your game will turn out way better. The time that you would spend, let's say half an hour working on your game, if you go and take that half hour and go eat something instead, or drink a bottle of water, that will make your remaining hours way more productive than if you had not had anything to drink or eat or rest at all. So keep that in mind. Like, take care of yourself. This don't crunch until you burn out. Then the game jam becomes a lot less fun. You have the time that you need. Enjoy yourself and take care of yourself. That's kind of what's most important. And lastly, share your game. I know so many people who make amazing things during Global Game Jam, and they don't show anyone or tell anyone. There's an amazing hashtag to do this. Hashtag GGJ20 on Twitter, on Instagram. You can put it on Discord, wherever. Share what you work on. We all want to kind of applaud your success, and part of the fun of Global Game Jam is seeing what everyone else makes and how everybody else interprets the theme. And by doing this, you never know what kind of friends you can make. I've made friends with a bunch of people who posted really cool looking games on the hashtags for Global Game Jam. And I just hit them up and asked them like, hey, how did you get this to work? Or, hey, your game looks really awesome. And next thing you know, you have some kind of brand new industry friends. And really, above all, again, I've said it before, I'll keep saying it, have fun. This is an amazing event. It's the most kind of a fun industry event I think that happens every year because it's accessible to everybody and everybody can take part and everybody can enjoy it together. So I'm very, very excited for you all and the amazing weekend that you're about to have. So with that, I want to leave it to questions. Any questions at all? If you have questions about how to use Unity, questions about Unity features, maybe you just have questions about game jams or even entering the industry or advice on what you should do with your game jam games. I was literally in your shoes not too many years ago, but I know that when people helped me out with the questions I had, like those, it was an extremely valuable resource. So I would love to pay it forward and kind of help anyone with kind of any questions they may have about making games. That's why I'm here. Also, definitely publish your games. That's another tip that I didn't share before, but there are different websites where you can host the games that you create, like itch.io. Absolutely post that, or if you have your own personal website, add your games there. Don't just share screenshots or videos, like, what you have, especially if you're really happy with it, even consider adding it to your portfolio, depending on kind of what you do in the industry. You can kind of really build up your career and kind of visibility within this industry through events like Global Game Jam. It's certainly something that helped me, and so I recommend it for all of you as well. So Unity's asset pack this year, we do not have a specific asset pack to this year, but I will show you this page I showed earlier. So in the Unity Asset Store this year, we still have our page up from Global Game Jam 2019, which was last year, which has over 70 free assets that you can use for your Game Jam experiences. And one thing that is brand new in Unity from last year is something called Unity Learn. And I'm jumping back into that right now. So Unity Learn comes with a bunch of project templates and tutorials that you can use to build up your games or to find resources. So if you want to make an RPG game, let's say, you can use our RPG Creator Kit. If you want to create a go-kart game, you could use our in-editor creative mods. And one thing I didn't mention before about the in-editor mods, those are tutorials that actually take place within the Unity editor. They're not YouTube videos, they're not text, they're not blogs. It actually opens within the editor and it will show you exactly where to click to make your game and to make it work. So I hope that helps. Oh, and also another tip. When you're sharing your game on social media, do not share the theme. That is the #1 Global Game Jam rule that you do not break. It's like Fight Club for Global Game Jam. Don't share the theme because not everybody gets the theme at the same time. You're going to hear the theme before I do. So if you find out the theme is like, I don't know, puppies, and you go on social media and say, oh, I can't wait to make a game about puppies, you're going to spoil it for everyone who's westward of you. So you're going to spoil it for like half of the United States and poor Hawaii, who always comes on last. And someone inevitably spoils the theme by then. But be a good global game jam citizen and don't share the theme. All right. Well, it was great joining you all during the stream. I'm so happy I got to participate in this. I really hope the information that I shared was helpful. I know Unity is a really big tool now, and a lot of the kind of questions I get for game jams are just related to, you know, what has Unity been up to? What's out there? What should I use for the jam? So I really hope that this presentation can serve as a good reference point. And whether you're watching now or you're watching this later, once again, I am clicking through slides really quickly. But I am Ashley Alicea. Thank you again for joining this presentation. One thing I want to mention is check out this link that I'm sharing here on this slide. You can actually really help me out and help the developer community in Puerto Rico out. So one thing that Unity wants to do is find out a little bit more about each developer community. And this is where you can leave your feedback and let us know, was my presentation helpful? Would presentations like this be useful to the community? Or maybe you want to hear talks about specific features. I'm trying to visit Puerto Rico later this year so I can give a workshop. So if you can share your feedback, that'll help me understand what I should bring. Maybe I should bring a coworker who has a specialty in something, but I'd really love to help the local community when I go visit. So you can let me know how I can do that through this form. So again, thank you so much for having me. Find me at Ashley on Twitter, Instagram, whatever social media. I'm also on the Puerto Rico Game Developers Association Discord. So if you want to message me there, if you have any questions that come up during the jam or in general, I'm more than happy to help out my fellow Boricuas. Really just reach out anytime. Thank you so much for having me. I hope you all have an amazing global game jam. Have fun and take care. Cuídense.